So, ladies, when you get to the final exam, what you will have is there are a number of parts to the exam. The first part is the multiple choice. And the multiple choice, obviously, you have a Scantron. Now, I brought a copy of the Scantron. I want you to see what the Scantron looks like. This is the Scantron. So it's a 50-question Scantron. Why am I showing it to you? Because it has a back side. I want you to write on the blue side. Okay, that's side number 1. I've asked the proctor to remind you of this. So anyway, if you get the Scantron and it's turned to the green side, just say to yourself, green is weird. Whoever's seen, you don't see green Scantron. So anyway, go back to the blue side, okay? Blue side is good. Okay, so what will happen is you'll be given the 50 multiple choice questions, a Scantron, you fill that out. When you're done with that, you come and you put it on the proctor's desk and you pick up the written portion. And of course the written portion is, first of all, a poem annotation followed by an interpretive response on that poem. Now, I'm going to show you an example of an interpretive response. So this is something that I pieced together from student essays, sentences I added to it. So, okay, this is the actual prompt. I just cut and pasted this from the exam to this file. So this is the actual prompt that you'll see. As you know, you don't know the name of the poem, right? So I've called it XYZ. So here's what it says. Using the poem XYZ, write an interpretive response, thesis statement, and 3 body paragraphs in which you identify the message and or theme of the poem, the literary devices that are used to convey that meaning, and the poem's thematic connection to Macbeth. You are expected to use direct quotes from the poem in your first 2 body paragraphs, 2 quotes per paragraph. For the 3rd paragraph, refer to at least 2 specific events, statements, or other evidence from the play to support your interpretation. Pay attention to organization, grammar, spelling, punctuation, etc. You should construct your response according to the same outline you've been using all year. So you'll have a previous page that you can compose an outline on, and then you begin your response. So a couple of points for you. Hey, Allison, if you could just alphabetize those 4 stacks for me and help yourself to a cupcake right here. Okay, so ladies, a couple of things to point out about this. Notice how I don't say poetic devices in this paragraph, right? It's literary devices. It's not poetic devices. So when you see the poem annotation, what I want you to do is, of course, identify the theme. You can write that. Look for the poetic devices, whether it's an open or a closed form poem, whether there's assonance and consonance and rhyme and meter and all those good things associated with poetic devices. But when you get to the interpretive response, leave that aspect of the poem behind. Focus on the theme and the message, okay? And then how these items are reinforced by the literary devices in the poem. Okay, so I'm going to give you a sample thesis statement, and I will put this on haiku, the thesis statement and this prompt. If you feel like memorizing it, that's not a bad idea. It'll give you a nice little formula to follow. So the message of Ozymandias, the fact that tyrants do not endure, is reinforced through the imagery, diction, and other devices. This theme is also found in the play Macbeth, when the cruel leader realizes that he is alone and his rule cannot last. Okay, so see, there you have the 3 things that I was asking you for. So here's the message. Tyrants do not endure. It's reinforced through imagery, diction, and other devices. And it's also found in the play Macbeth, and you give me something specific about Macbeth that lets me realize, okay, this is how she's going to set up her essay. Yes, Ryan?
I was just wondering, did you put that thesis statement together, or was that a student's thesis?
I put that thesis statement together, yes. I'm just going to read you these paragraphs really quickly, just to give you an idea of what it could sound like. In Ozymandias, a traveler describes to the speaker what remains of a statue of the once great king Ozymandias. Apparently very little is left. 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Notice I write L.23, so that's how you would quote this. He continues to describe the sculpted face with cold, mean features. Even now, the sculptor's dislike of Ozymandias is evident, since his emotions are, quote, stamped on these lifeless things, close quotes, parentheses, L.7. The king was disliked by the people, and this is shown in the way the sculptor depicts him. The way the poem describes this broken, abandoned statue shows that even a once strong king can fall and be destroyed. However, the people's hatred for him persists even when nothing else remains. So see, I've talked about imagery somewhat in this poem, and I took some of the sentences from a student essay. It's all about imagery and theme in this first paragraph. You go into the second paragraph, and there's a continual discussion, continuing discussion of imagery and other devices. So, second paragraph. The poem's visual imagery describes the abandoned place in the desert and features a continuing metaphor. The detailed... Sorry, okay. Okay, no? Lost my... There we go. Okay. The detailed imagery in lines 4 and 5 help readers to easily imagine the cold features of the hated king. Another quote, readers are now able to connect the king's dark expression with the people's reason for disliking him. The statue itself is a metaphor. It's made of stone, which seems so strong at first, like the king, but will eventually wear down and break. The statue symbolizes the vulnerability of men and women, as well as the impact cruel leaders have on their population. The reader wonders whether the fact that nothing remains of this once mighty empire is a result of the king's cruelty and his failure to rule in a just manner. This finality is echoed in the shortest sentence of the poem, nothing beside remains. The empty feeling is further conveyed by the visual imagery of the infinite desert in the last line. Now let's just take a quick look at the last paragraph. Like Ozymandias, Macbeth's reign also ended with no one caring for him. The poem's theme of frailty and unenduring power connects with Macbeth. Macbeth was in the strong position of power, yet he could be broken like the statue. His own demons and the people's hatred of him were slowly breaking him. Okay, so he describes to Lady Macbeth the scorpions that were poisoning his mind. So again, that's concrete data that lets me know that you really know this play. This caused him to kill and become cruel until people no longer supported him. Then she talks about Malcolm and Macbeth. They predicted that the people's lack of loyalty would cause his downfall. They were right. Macbeth was completely alone against everyone, like the broken statue left in the middle of the desert. The legacy of both Macbeth and Ozymandias is the people's hatred of them. Ladies, one of my blocks, B block, had Death Snips Proud Men. You remember that poem? That was in Antigone, the Antigone unit. So here's the thesis statement. The message of Death Snips Proud Men is that men and women are helpless in the face of all-powerful death. This message is reinforced through the imagery, tone, and other devices, and is echoed in Macbeth's final soliloquy. Okay, so again, you've got the three ideas in here. I have the message, men and women are helpless in the face of death. It's reinforced through imagery, tone, and other devices, and it's echoed in Macbeth's final soliloquy. So this is one I wrote, and the last paragraph. I want to read the last paragraph to you because this is a nice way to review some ideas. The same message appears in Macbeth. In his final soliloquy, Macbeth complains about the futility of man's existence. There is a bunch of sound and fury, and then life is over. He refers to the village idiot dying alone in the gutter, helpless in the face of death. Even when his beloved partner in crime takes her own life, Macbeth hardly protests. After all, he and his wife have been tormented by guilt and sleeplessness. At least when they die, they will have a good sleep. something promised even to proud men in Carl Sandburg's poem. So see how, I notice that I don't quote from the poem in this third stanza. They're just specific references in here that show me that you know the poem. I'm sorry, you know the play. You remember, you know it well enough to provide a couple of specific references to it. Yeah, Amanda.
So you don't really want us to talk a lot about the poem in the third paragraph, but towards the end connect it to Macbeth?
So the idea is that the third paragraph shows how that theme that you identified at the very beginning is evident in Macbeth.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it's really not necessary to talk that much about the poem. That's why you wouldn't need to quote from the poem again, because this last paragraph is really about Macbeth and how that theme shows up in Macbeth. You know, if you want to reference the poem and tie a connection there, like I've done at the very end, that's fine, that's nice.
Okay.
Sort of wraps it up. Okay, remember, I'm not going to be here on Tuesday, so I want you to ask me any questions now. Ryan.
But I think in the instructions you say at least cite 2 quotes per paragraph.
Just for the first two paragraphs.
That's for the first 2 paragraphs. Okay? So with the first paragraph, so you have your thesis statement with 3 supporting points. Then your first body paragraph, you have 2 quotes from the poem. Second body paragraph, 2 quotes from the poem. Third paragraph just has specific references to items in Macbeth, whether it's plot development or speech or something like that. Okay, any other questions about this? Remember, your topic sentences, the beginning of each paragraph, really important. Have to have big picture idea. So when you see in the instruction it says, you should construct your response according to the same outline you've been using all year. And what that is just this idea that you have this one sentence thesis statement and that it connects to, it has these 3 points in it, and each of those points connects to the topic sentence in the body paragraph. Does that make sense? Okay, let's move on. Let's go right to the study guide. Let me open that up. So please pull out the study guide. I'd like you to make a couple of corrections to it. So you will have 90 minutes for this test. I really recommend, ladies, when you're writing the interpretive response, that you do not write out a rough draft and then copy it over. The instructions that the proctor will read to you are use a sheet of paper to come up with an outline and then write from that outline. You just won't have time, and if you give me bits and pieces of paper, you lose points that way. Okay, so we will, okay, first thing I want you to do is cross out your copy of Macbeth, okay? So as we know, that's not on there. In terms of the multiple choice section of the exam, you have 50 questions. The first 18 are on the 7 poems. 2 to 4 questions on each of the poems. Then you have 3 grammar questions. Then you have about 14 Antigone questions and 16 Macbeth questions. The questions on Antigone and Macbeth are not so much factual as they are getting you to read a passage and identify what's going on in the passage. So a lot of it is just how familiar you are with the language and how well you can understand the language. Okay, in a minute we'll talk about the poems. So here are some general literary terms you should be familiar with. Under form and structure, there's something about quatrain. So quatrain, when do you need to know quatrain?